Welcome to Connection Accepted. Today we've got Katelyn Burgoyne, founder of Unignorable, on the podcast. Katelyn, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt.
Katelyn, for people who are meeting you for the first time, let's just take a few steps back into the past. And can you talk a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how that led to what you're working on today?
Yeah, I'll give you the Coles Notes version because the entrepreneur story is long. I've been doing this thing for 15 years, multiple kind of like successes and some very big failures. So I'll give you the kind of the shorter version. I was, my first business was a branding agency. And so we worked with clients, helping them try to like figure out their visual brand, their strategy, and grew that agency to about, I think we were 9 people at our largest. We were working with some cool clients. We did some stuff with Target and Holiday Inn, but I always felt that tension that I think a lot of service-based businesses feel. And I was like, I'm tired of like exchanging time for money. I want to build something more scalable. And at the time, I considered breaking into like the education space, but this was like 2013. And at that time, I was like, oh, it's too crowded. That was just kind of funny because it's absolutely was not too crowded at that point. Like lots and lots of people are very successful in that space still today. But so I was like, all right, I'm not going to do anything in like the education and course space. Like maybe I'll build a tech company. How hard could that be? Well, it turns out really fucking hard, really hard. But I didn't know that at the time, which is good because I probably wouldn't have tried it. But I went off and we built our MVP product, got venture capitalists involved, went to market. Everything looked great from the outside. The business was growing really fast. It built a two-sided marketplace, and at the time, it was a platform for women entrepreneurs specifically to buy, sell, and swap skills. That was kind of the original version. And we were growing fast. We were growing faster than like Freelancer had, that Thumbtack had, like these other service-based marketplaces. But our product was not sticky. And people would come in and they'd create a profile and they'd like, post and connect with a few other like users, and they didn't hang out, they didn't stay. And so it just didn't work. And ultimately we ended up running out of money, had to go personally bankrupt because I've been bankrolling this whole thing with like revenue from my agency. And then eventually, like, investors were like, we won't invest until you're all in. So I'm like, okay, but I still need to pay people. So what are we going to do here? So close down that business, super burned out, trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And I was lucky because I had my lead investors had a bunch of other companies in their portfolio, and they were like, "You were really good at the marketing side of a startup, and not so good at the product side." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, I know that was a problem, but we've got these other companies, and these companies are great at the product side, and they're not good at like helping people to understand why they should want their products, telling their story, building their brand." And so I started working with a bunch of these brilliant entrepreneurs, and I would ask them the question that we need to know as marketers, which is, tell me about your customers. And I was shocked how often they couldn't really give me clear answers. They would argue, the founding team would debate who the customers were. They would rattle off like 3 different types of customers that were incredibly different. I remember one founder looked me square in the face and he said, our customers are B2B businesses with anywhere between 10 and 500 employees. I was like, "What?" Like, that's not a target customer. And so that led me to going deep down the path of like helping companies understand who their target customers were, why those people buy. It led me to launch my first newsletter, Why We Buy, which kind of grew into uh like a beloved newsletter for marketers, helping them to understand behavioral science and like the psychology of why people buy. And then I launched, a kind of a side project called Unignorable with the team at Demand Curve, great marketing team, helping entrepreneurs to understand basically the science of attention so they could build a successful personal brand. And that has then become my focus now. So like, fast forward 3 years from the original launch of that, the focus has shifted, but the goal is the same, which is that through Unignorable, we help entrepreneurs to understand how to become unignorable by identifying like the idea that they can be known for and own in the eyes of their target customers. That's where I am today. And it was a whole weedy, windy journey to get there.
You have such an interesting background and such an interesting journey. I have so many questions, but let's start with this. Have
Mhm.
you always been entrepreneurial? Because I noticed you founded multiple ventures and you're a founder today. Have you always been like this?
No, like, it's interesting, you talk to founders and like, "Yeah, like, I was selling lemonade when I was, like, 10," or like, I had, like, a side hustle, like, selling stuff on eBay, like, I was not like that. I did not like, when I went to university, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was gonna do journalism, I was gonna do law. Business was not even a thought. I never did any business courses in my undergrad. Ended up doing an English degree. Um, I kinda got lucky because I was floating around after doing an English degree trying to figure out what to do. Not really a big great degree to get jobs. Like, there's, like unless you wanna go teach in, like, teach English somewhere or, become a professor or something, there's not a lot of paths. So then I was waitressing and, like, trying to figure things out, and I had this really amazing, boss at the restaurant I was working at. She was this young entrepreneur. She'd started the restaurant at like 27 years old. She'd had an amazing career before that in finance, and she was really inspiring. And she said to me one day, she's like, "You're really good with people. You're a great writer. Have you considered doing PR?" And I was like, "I've never really thought about that." And then I went home and Googled what PR meant because I had no freaking clue, but I didn't want her to know. But I was like, "Oh, PR, that's interesting. That does sound like something I'd be good at." And so I ended up going back to school to get a graduate in PR. And in discovering PR, I decided I learned about the big sister of PR, which is marketing. And I was like, oh, wait, this is what I like. And so I got my dream job working at an advertising agency. It was a temp job. I was there for 3 months. And out of the blue, this guy reaches out to me who had found me on Twitter. At this point, I am not active on Twitter. Like, I think I had posted like 3 times. I really still have no idea how he found me. But he reached out. He had been an agency owner. He'd sold his agency and he was trying to do something different. He had a few big clients that he was brought with him from his agency. And he was like, I don't want to build a big team. I don't want to have payroll. He's like, I want to bring in a creative collective of entrepreneurs who are all freelancers and we can come together and work on projects and we can do things separately. And he was like, if you want to come work with me, I can guarantee you, 15 hours a week of work. And then you build your freelance business on your own separate from that. And it was, like, scary as fuck because, like, at this point, I'd been marketing for 3 months. I had no experience. I was really in no position to start my own business, but it also felt like an opportunity that I was like, "I'm gonna kick myself if I don't take this." And so I started working with him, and within a year, I'd kind of, like, built my own client roster. I ended up hiring my first couple of employees, and then eventually building my own agency and going out on my own. But had those 2 kind of things not happened, like, had I not worked for that incredible young entrepreneur who saw something in me that I wouldn't have recognized, and had this rando person reach out to me through Twitter and ask me if I wanted to come and be his, like, full-time freelancer, I don't think I'd ever become an entrepreneur because it just wasn't something that felt like I just it didn't it wasn't something that I had necessarily seen a lot of in my life. It just didn't feel like me. So, yeah, I think I got very lucky.
That's really reassuring because I think that a lot of people don't see themselves as entrepreneurs. Or I know I personally, before I started my LinkedIn marketing agency, which I'm doing full time now, I definitely, if you even think a few years back, would have thought I was crazy
Mhm.
to try and start my own business. And I've only been on this journey for a very short amount of time, so knock on wood, time will tell if it works out. But I think there's something really impactful about those two people that came into your life. First, being, your restaurant manager, that young girl who's also an entrepreneur who almost planted the seed in your head. And then the second guy who gave you like an opportunity to really build your skills and be in an entrepreneurial environment and whatnot, and see that you could probably do this for yourself as well.
Mhm.
Caitlin, I'm curious as well. So you're working for this guy as a full-time freelancer, and then at what point do you decide I want to go and start my own branding agency?
So, that's a great question. Because he had only committed a certain amount of time to me, I knew that I would need to backfill that. And I was young. I think I was how old was I? I was 25. I didn't have a network. I didn't have, necessarily the experience to feel like I could present myself as an agency. But I also wanted to make sure that I was able to get other clients to be able to justify taking this leap. And so I started initially, it's funny, I started trying to do a little bit of stuff on social media. Keep in mind, this was 2010. Like, it's so long. At that time, social media was kind of new. It was like I remember going to school and, like, none of the when I was in PR, like, the professors were like, "Well, there's this new thing, social media." And I remember working at the first agency I worked at, and I was only there for 3 months, but I was like, "None of these people even understand social media." I'm like, "What the hell?" Because it was so new. But I remember trying to do a little bit of stuff to build my own personal brand, never really took off, never really committed to it at the time. But I needed to get clients, so I figured out some kind of like gray hat SEO techniques, and when you Googled like marketing agency Halifax, like my little website would come up. And so I started getting a stream of clients that way. And then just through referrals and word of mouth. And because I did good work. I'm a perfectionist. I made sure that I did work that I was proud of and that the team was proud of. We ended up kind of growing mostly through word of mouth and through search. So I fear is a great thing. When you are afraid of how you're gonna pay your rent, you figure it out.
That is such a good way to put it, and something that I totally resonate with as well. Side note, can you also describe a little bit more for people who are unfamiliar with the work that branding agencies do? When you were at this firm, what were the services that you guys were specifically offering, right? Because branding can be a lot of things. It can be like web design, it can be, content, it can be a lot of things. Was there a specific thing that or series of services that you guys specialized in?
There should have been, but not really. So what I wanted to do and what I was obsessed with at the time was guerrilla marketing. So you'd see these incredible campaigns put on by big brands, when McDonald's would take over a crosswalk and make it look like French fries, or there were just these very cool guerrilla campaigns. And that's what I wanted to do because I saw them as this like, the it was what I saw as, like, the next frontier of marketing, because it doesn't feel like marketing, it's inherently viral, and so what I wanted to do was guerrilla marketing, but I was getting all of my clients through people that were searching for, like, marketing agency in Halifax. Typically, the people who didn't even know a name of a marketing agency in Halifax were either inexperienced entrepreneurs kinda just getting started or small businesses that had never done a lot of marketing work in the past. So most of the people who came inbound, they didn't wanna necessarily invest budget in something like that. They wanted a website. They wanted, a flyer. So we did a lot of, like, brand design work, web work, and mostly websites and print was what we were doing at the time. But the stuff that I loved doing and it became very clear to me from the beginning you needed to do this piece first, was I loved doing the positioning and messaging work because until that piece got done, you really didn't understand what how to go off and write the website. You really didn't understand how what the visual would be. And so that was something that I just always intuitively knew came first. And it's been, I think, what has made me so successful in other ventures because I think a lot of folks look at that as like a nice to have, like, we'll figure that out later. We'll get our product to market. We'll, launch the service and later we'll come back and try to think about the strategy. And when you don't have that strong foundational starting place, you can do so much right. Like you can have a beautiful website, you can have, copy that's kind of punchy and sexy. But when the underlying narrative and strategy isn't locked, a lot of your efforts won't be as successful. So I think that that's one thing that just from the beginning, I was like, I can't do this work unless I do this part first. And doing that part first it was always helped me with my own businesses. It would help our clients. I'd kind of like it was harder to sell that to them because nobody wanted to pay for it, right? They wanted the website, and the website was like, I can go get a website from somebody else who's not gonna make me make this upfront investment. At the time, it wasn't very much. Like, I think the positioning work that we'd start with would usually be like 3 grand or something. But when somebody's looking at spending 10K on the whole project, they're like, "Well, why am I gonna spend like a third of my budget on this piece?" and I can go over to this guy and they'll do my website for 5K. Like, what's the difference? And so it was not always easy for me to articulate why that mattered. And that's something I never got as good at as I should have. And then when I ended up pivoting, we took basically the core team that was from the original agency, and we all were working on the startup. So I was doing the client work to pay the bills, to keep the team paid, and then we were working on the tech company together. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it was not thoughtful. It was not this beautifully packaged service, which now that's what I'm building with the new version of Unignorable. But at the time, I was just taking whatever projects came in that would pay the team, which was a mistake.
I'm so glad that you're really honest about what it was like, because I think people who want to be entrepreneurs have this perception sometimes that, they see someone who runs a business and on the outside it looks very successful, but what they don't realize is there's often a lot of chaos, especially in the early stages when you're just figuring things out. And it never feels as clean and as structured as you would like it to. I find myself in this situation a lot where I have this idea of something that I want us to do, or even when in the very early stages, I had this very clear idea of, okay, this is the service that we're going to deliver to this specific kind of client. And
Mhm,
it's going to pan out exactly in this way. And almost 9 times out of 10, it never turns out exactly how I
mhm,
wanted to, but the beautiful thing is that you're still learning, and every client that you work with teaches you something new, even if they're maybe not an ideal
mhm.
client. And over time, you just get better at what you're doing. And it sounds like during that time, you guys were figuring things out and you were still taking action, which is the most important thing, right? When you're an entrepreneur. And I really respect that. And I think it's also really cool that you built relationships with the people who were at the agency, and you guys all were working together in the tech company as well, while you were still, keeping the lights on with the agency to support payroll and everything like that. But it's really cool that you were able to mobilize that team for the new venture as well.
One of the things that you said is like one of my favorite quotes in marketing comes from Rory Sutherland. And I feel like as a marketer, just like this has helped me breathe easier. Marketing is overwhelming. I mean, every industry has challenges, but I feel like marketing has some of the biggest in the sense that there's Andrew Chen talks about the law of shitty click-throughs. Like as soon as something starts working, you've really got a window, like, a tactic. As soon as the tactic starts working, or as soon as a channel is new, you've really got the shorter window to take advantage of that. And so marketers feel like they're constantly having to reinvent, and it's overwhelming. And there's a lot of pressure on marketers to get it right. But Rory Sutherland says this thing that I love, which is like, marketing isn't about getting it right, it's about being less wrong. And I think that that's so true because our job as marketers is to start with a strong foundation, to have a strategic reason to do what we do, but then to put things out in the market and listen, right? To get feedback from the target customer, to learn why a customer is a bad fit and we thought they might have been perfect. And then you actually start working with them and you see, oh shit, this isn't the right ICP at all. And so I think marketers, we put all this weight on ourselves that we have to get it right. And you don't get it right out of the gate, but you can be less wrong over time. And that's why you have to have patience to actually like launch things, see what works, start smart, but like recognize that it's going to change. It's going to change even if you have it perfect right now. The market's going to change. The world's going to change. New competitors are going to come around. Platforms are going to change. And then you're going to have to evolve. So marketing feels like there's just this constant volatility. And I think when you start to lean into that and see it as a feature instead of a bug, then you can become really unstoppable. But I think when we fight against it and feel like, oh, like, it's there's something wrong, I'm doing something wrong because things are changing or because this isn't working or because like that's where you can really get in your own head and it can screw you up. And I've been there.
I also wanted to ask you about the branding, positioning, strategy side of things. You mentioned earlier what has helped you to succeed at these later ventures is the fact that you do the upfront work of thinking about who your buyer is, mapping out
Mhm.
the strategy and the positioning before you actually do create the product and launch. For founders that are thinking about launching a product but haven't yet fully fleshed out their strategy and their positioning, what are some things that people often run into that are common pitfalls or things to watch out for? What should they be thinking about?
I think that one of the reframes that helped me to really think about what the goal is when it comes to positioning and messaging work is that you really have to think about your product as being an answer to a problem, and then you have to make an argument for why your product deserves to exist. And this is true for people who are building a personal brand too. Like in that case, you're the product, and you need to think about like why what message you share. And so I don't think enough people go into it that in mind, right? They're not thinking about why should this exist? What argument can I make that the market is going to take in and believe of why this should exist? And the argument matters because if your argument is we're a little bit better than this thing or it's a little bit cheaper than this thing, like that's not a viable argument for long because somebody's always going to come along that can do it cheaper or that will, add a couple features that you don't have, which make their thing potentially better. And this is where brand is so important. Brand is essentially inviting your customers into a story and they need to buy into the argument. And so I don't think enough people think about that. They just have this idea, they want it to exist. Oftentimes we're coming at it from our angle. Our angle is, I don't want to have a job. Our angle is, I want to make more money. And so we're thinking about bringing something into the world that we want to exist for our selfish purposes. But to get the market to want to adopt a thing, you need to argue from their angle. You need to see like why aren't they able to do what they want to do today? What's holding them back? What are the problems that are keeping them stuck? What are the beliefs that are not serving them that are actually maybe wrong that they need to help in reframing so they can see a new way? And it's in doing that that you're able to create something that really breaks through. And that work is work that takes time. It takes a lot of competitive analysis of understanding what else is in the market. What do the buyers already believe? What are the macro shifts that are happening that are changing the way that your target customers see their world or their challenge? And it's not as fun as just like making it like making the brand pretty or producing like the cool videos, but it's essential because it's essentially what gives you an edge.
For people that run services businesses or agencies, I think that a common question that may come up is how do I position myself differently? Because, for example, today I run a ghostwriting agency, and to a lot of people, that can be perceived as commodities, like a commoditized service. So you end up competing on price, and it's just like, let me find the cheapest guy. So if you were to advise someone running a marketing agency on how they can stand out and not be seen as just yet another one of the hundreds of other marketing agencies that are going after buyers, how would you advise them?
Mhm. This is a great question. This is actually exactly what we do at Unignorable. So Unignorable 2.0 is the Ownable Ideas agency, and we help our clients who are big brain experts or typically consultants, agency owners, coaches. We help them to find an idea that they can own. And there in the way we look at it, there are kind of like 6 different types of ownable ideas. So there are, I'll kind of list these off, I think it'll be helpful for the audience. There's the coined problems. That's basically a name struggle that people recognize but didn't have words for before. There's a new category. That's a new type of solution in a market space where you're the obvious leader. So I'm making the idea of ownable ideas a new category. So it's very, very meta. But I'm like, I'm not a personal branding agency because there's a lot of those. I'm the ownable ideas agency. And it's you don't you shouldn't always create a new category because it's actually one of the hardest things to pull off. And this is why there's other ways to do this. The coin problem is a great example. So a entrepreneur, the agency owner who did this incredibly well is Chris Walker. If people are on LinkedIn, they probably know Chris Walker, but he was building his original agency. I'm blanking on the name now. He sold it, I think, a couple of years ago. But what he did brilliantly was he coined a problem and he called it the attribution. Uh, I think it was the attribution gap. And he had all this data that showed that all of these companies are spending all of this money trying to manage and understand pipeline and where do customers actually come from and what's converting. And they were by default basically investing all of their money in last touch, which is often an ad or something like that, but that wasn't the thing that had actually built the demand. It was what he coined as dark social, right? And dark social is kind of like his philosophy. And it was this idea that most of the demand is actually coming from people talking about your product on like a conference, people DMing somebody that they know on Slack and being like, "Hey, we're looking for a product like this," and then giving a recommendation. And a lot of that was coming from founder or team content on LinkedIn, right? And so he was able to make this argument that the coined problem was the attribution gap and this idea that you don't actually know where your customers are coming from and you are by default making wrong investments because you think you should put more in Google ads or more in Meta when actually it's coming from these conversations, and those conversations are from your stuff you can't track, the stuff like the LinkedIn posts, the stuff like going and talking at a conference. So he's a great example of the coin problem. um, Another ownable idea is a philosophy, right? So Simon Sinek, very famous for the philosophy "Start with why." He was before that a like unknown consultant running a marketing agency. After that, now he can charge like $1 million to do a keynote because he had an ownable idea that was a philosophy that like just changed the way people see things. You can also have a method or a framework. So you think about StoryBrand. StoryBrand is essentially a methodology for creating messaging, and it's very owned by Don Miller. Like they've built an amazing company based on that method. You can invite somebody into an identity. That's another type of ownable idea. So Justin Welsh did this incredibly well, right? He didn't coin the word solopreneur. It existed before Justin started using that word. But when you hear that word, who do you think of? And what Justin did brilliantly was he allowed people to see solopreneurship as actually this brave and defiant thing that they could do, whereas before, people were almost afraid to say they were a one-person shop, right? They'd try to make themselves look bigger. They would, apologize for being small, but Justin was like, "No, no, no, being a solopreneur is actually this brilliant thing because 'cause you're choosing freedom over building this big company that it, like, burns you out." And so he redefined what that word meant, and he gave people an identity to step into. And then the last one is, what I call X versus Y, and it's essentially a this or that distinction. So think about deep work versus shallow work, right? So deep work, which Cal Newport is famous for, that's his ownable idea. It changed the way a lot of us work. We were like, shit, I'm spending all this time context switching between different things. I should be spending my time on the deep work. But you need to know the contrast to deep work before you have that revelation. So my belief is that what agency owners, consultants, what we need to be doing is we need to really define our ownable idea. And it takes work. It takes a lot of self-discovery. A lot of people have these in their mind, but they're not articulated well. Like they know what their thing is, but when they sit down and actually talk about it, it just comes out as a jumbled mess and it doesn't connect.
Mm.
And that's because they haven't clarified their argument yet, right? They need to work on clarifying the argument as to why their thing, their ownable idea, is a solution that people should step into. And that's the work that I do at Unignorable, and I think that that's a piece that's often missing, and once you get that, it's just you can really move a lot faster.
This is pure gold. What are some questions then that a business owner should be asking themselves when they're thinking about what is my ownable idea? Is it like, what am I good at? What do I have a unique edge at? Or maybe thinking more deeply about this from the customer's perspective.
I think about it in the same way of, like, how you build an argument. So, like, Aristotle was the one of the original people who talked about, like, how to build an argument, but essentially you have to think about a number of factors. It kinda sits on top of, like, what do I believe that is counter to what other people in my space believe? What does my target customer want, right? Because you need to understand, like, what do they want? Because they're not gonna step into your new thing and believe it unless you know what they want. With Cal Newport, like, everybody wanted to be more productive. That's why deep work was so attractive because we had this problem, which was I want to be more productive, but yet I feel like I work all day and nothing gets done. And so that's the problem, right? So it sits on the apex of like, what do you believe that other people don't, or how do you work differently than other people? Does your target audience want to achieve, and what's stopping them? What's holding them back? And also, like, what are you uniquely good at, and how does this all connect to your business? And that's where I think it gets a little cloudy. And I'm still working through some content around this, but I've been toying with this. There's kind of two challenges. One of the big ones is what I call the expert's paradox. The expert's paradox is twofold. we are often very good at doing a thing and really bad at doing it for ourselves. And there's all sorts of psychological reasons why that's true. Like you'll make time to do like your client work and you would do it so great. And then you'll let stuff go out for yourself that you would never let pass for a client, right? But also, we really struggle to see ourselves clearly because, again, there's this fog around the idea, and there's so much nuance, there's so many layers, there's so many strings you can pull when it's your own thing. And when somebody else sits down with you, they can often get clarity faster than you can. And that's all part of the expert's paradox. And I also think that I'm a believer, and I'm still thinking through the undercurrent of, like, how to explain this well, because like, this is the whole thing, like, building an argument, right? Like, it takes time to build it, and mine is not clear yet, so I'll give you the early version of it, and we'll see how, how it evolves. I'm still working on it, but I think when it comes to people who sell their thinking, like agency owners, like consultants, like coaches, that your strategy and positioning and messaging should actually be built founder down instead of product up. Because typically people look at the business and they'll go, oh, you're an SEO agency, so we need to work around that. But I think it should actually come founder down where you think, okay, what do you distinctly believe? And like, how is what you believe different? How do you solve the problem differently than other people in your space? Because oftentimes an agency is this kind of malleable thing where you can change your service pack. Like you can package things a little bit differently. You can change your messaging. It's easy to change what the core product is. What's much harder is actually getting a sticky message that drives like people to want to work with you. And so I think that we should start founder down because you look at somebody like a Justin Welsh, right? Once Justin found that solopreneur message was sticky, then he was able to do all sorts of things on the product side. He has courses, he's got a community. I think he had like some on demand. He's got like a paid newsletter, I think. Like the product side of it, had you started with the product side of it first, as opposed to the foundational belief and like how he solved the problem differently, I don't think he would have landed where he was. So I think it needs to come founder down. And what that means is starting with the problem that the founder solves differently and why they do it, like what their beliefs are, and then reflecting that back in the product as opposed to looking at the product and going, okay, you run a SEO agency or you have a, web design agency, like, let's work on positioning that. I don't know. That's my it's an evolving, theory, but, like, I'm thinking through it, and I think it brings true.
So what I'm hearing is that starting founder down as opposed to service or product upwards is you really think hard about what does the founder believe that is maybe differentiated about what it is that they're doing, or in the case of personal branding, for example, commonly viewed as a very commoditized service, but maybe the founder has a very unique perspective on what it takes to build a personal brand or what a good personal brand actually looks like, and it's different from what others may think. Being able to clearly communicate that idea is one thing, and changing your positioning, that's the easy part, but then is it actually a sticky enough idea where people really resonate and actually see you as the person that is associated with that idea? How do you know when the idea is sticky enough? Do you have to try testing the new positioning out for a few months and then just like look at the data, or are there any telltale signals?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely on it. Like, you come up with basically the strategy, you commit to the strategic direction. What we do with our clients is we help them to kind of like figure out the language around it. But then you have to go out and put it out in market. And you have to listen to that feedback and that signal from your audience. And oftentimes it will evolve a bit. So, looking at Unignorable as an example, like when we first started doing the work with Unignorable, there were a lot at the time. I think we launched in the end of 2022 and there weren't as many personal branding courses or cohorts at that time. We were kind of new to the market. There were some, but not necessarily on X and LinkedIn. And most of the ones that existed were for like Instagram or Facebook. So we were kind of like early, and I wanted to differentiate it. And at the time, like our positioning and messaging differentiated from others because we said there's lots of places out there that will tell you the tactical stuff of how to build a personal brand. We actually get into the why things work. So we teach the psychology of what drives attention and persuasion. And that was our differentiator. Now, that was a good differentiator then, but then a lot of things shifted in the market. I started seeing more people coming into the space and making that making that their message for their personal branding services. So it's like, do I still want to lean heavily into that? Or do I want to, pivot the message to something that's more distinctive and really put claim on that? And that led to me focusing on ownable ideas as kind of a new category. So I think you need to listen to the market. Like we were able to build the original Unignorable challenge. I think we did like 1.2 million in 2 years with it very much as a side project for the two of us. Like the message worked, but at the end of the day, too, you have to look at the market and you have to look at yourself. Like I got excited about the messaging and positioning side of personal branding more because I watched a lot of our alumni and there were some that like they took off in a really big way. And there were others that produced good content that like would check all of the boxes of what makes for good content. But the underlying message was weak. And so they never took off in the way they deserved to. So I was like, if I can focus on this one thing and that thing becomes like, if you can do that one thing and it's hard, but that is able to give them a much higher chance of success, then I want to just focus right there. Um, so you have to listen to the market. You'll start hearing people reusing your language and you'll start seeing people copy you. Like I've already seen a bunch of people pop up with like their own take on like ownable ideas. But you'll see people copying you. You'll see people using your language. You'll see people, responding to your post being like, oh my God, this is what I need. That's all of the signals that it's working. And the big mistake that a lot of people make, myself included, is their message starts drifting because they get bored. A lot of us entrepreneurs are like really like I'm ADHD. It's crazy to me how many entrepreneurs are. Are you ADHD?
A little bit.
We get excited about new stuff, and so message drift starts happening where the message that was working, that you've been established in the minds of your buyers, you get bored of it. You get bored of saying the same thing all the time, and so you stop saying it, and then you kinda drift into this new thing, and so I think that you need to commit to it, but if it's not working, then it's okay to pivot too. Or if something happens and changes in the market, like I was chatting with a brilliant, entrepreneur the other day, and he'd been in the space helping agency like B2B SaaS companies with their positioning and messaging. And he was kind of like not really making a big splash on social. And then the team from Fletch came along, and Fletch has done a brilliant job of like building awareness as the go-to people for B2B messaging like startups. And he was like, I don't want to compete with them. So he shifted, and that's fine, right? Like you can look at what's happening in the market and go, I don't think I want to like I'm not going to go up against Justin Welsh on solopreneurship. Like that would be dumb.
That's so funny you mention Fletch. I actually spoke to Anthony Pieri not just a few weeks ago, actually. His episode will be coming out soon as well. But that's such a good point because oftentimes I think we know who the clear market leader is in whatever it is that we're doing. And there's this tendency to immediately think about, okay, how can we compete directly with them? But what I'm hearing from you is maybe the answer is not go directly head to head with them on the exact same positioning and branding. Come up with your own unique position and your unique angle so that people see you as a category of one and as not just a watered down Walmart version of Justin Welsh, right? And obviously much easier said than done, I think, but the idea makes a lot of sense.
It's very hard to do, and I think that for a lot of people, they beat themselves up because they haven't figured it out yet, and let me tell you, it's a hard thing to figure out, it's a hard thing to get right, like, and so if you don't feel like you're there yet, that's normal, and it's harder for experts because of the F paradox, because of the fact that, like, we don't often carve out the time to invest in our doing our own strategic work, to invest in doing our own content, which is why really smart people should work with ghostwriters like yourself, but they're gonna get way more impact out of that investment when some of this foundational work is done, right? And we won't take the time to do it for ourselves. And it's crazy how much time we'll commit to our clients' projects when we'll just like ignore our own. And we just don't have the mental bandwidth to do it for ourselves. So it's hard. And that's why you should seek help.
How large is the agency today? I know you mentioned someone else working with you on it.
It's me right now. I have a contract writer that works with me on Why We Buy. I've got an amazing kind of like Jill of all trades. I wouldn't call her a virtual assistant 'cause she does so much more than that. But I have a team member for the why we buy side. Right now, it's just, actually just about to hire a strategist. I'm trying to decide whether I'd really love a partner. And so there's a few people that I'm talking to about a strategic partnership. Like I look at what Anthony and Rob have done at Fletch and I love it because they're both practitioners. They're both like they love doing the work and they've built this incredible business because I think that there's something really nice about a kind like, back and forth to like build a methodology where you can like push each other and challenge. Cause like there's lots of times where if you're just on your own, like and you have like employees, they won't challenge you in the way that a co-founder will. Like they won't and they don't obsess about it in the way that a co-founder will. So I'm thinking about I need to hire a strategist for sure. But I'm also hoping that the person that I bring on as a strategist will potentially become a co-founder or that I'll find a co-founder once I kind of get more traction. We did only the first 5 beta clients for Unignorable, this new version. I honestly didn't think I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And I told every single one of them that like became the beta clients. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm like, this is a really big thing to promise. I don't know if I'm going to be able to figure it out. Like, and I can promise you I'm going to try really hard. And so now I'm starting to like actually build a methodology of how to do this in a more consistent and predictable way. But the first 5 were just like, drinking from a fire hose. There was so much that I went into it thinking it was going to work this particular way and it didn't. So it's me now, strategist, being the job description for that will go live in a probably next week. But I'd like to build this company to be a small team of brilliant people. And I'm actually more of a product person than a marketer. Like I got good at marketing because I knew that if I built product, I would need to get people to want them. But I love building products. So like in my dream scenario, we're like building we've built like a really good like client workflow similar to what I'm sure Fletch has in the back end where it's quite systematic and all there's a lot of like steps and that's the stuff I'm excited about building out. And I want to build stuff, bring in somebody who's like deeply passionate about strategy and messaging work who's going to step into that role.
That makes a lot of sense. And from my conversation with Anthony, it sounds like him and his co-founder working together. They've also got one full-time employee who I believe is based in Berlin, who helps with some of the design and repositioning work and can take up some of the projects as well. And then, they'll pull in contractors, freelancers, like as needed for various needs, but they have a pretty tight team as well. And I totally hear you on the point about a co-founder as well. Daniel, my co-founder, who's not here today, but that I work with on this podcast, it is a very different experience versus running the ghostwriting agency where I am the solo founder. There's no one to really push back. There's no one to, bounce those ideas off of. And the level of obsession you talked about is hard to find in a employee just because unless they've got a big stake in the business, like, yeah, they're just not going to care as much. But yeah, resonate with all of that. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about LinkedIn. You obviously have a very large following. For the audience who's listening, Katelyn's got today 92,000 followers. How did that happen?
So I had a bit of a head start on LinkedIn in the sense that I had been building my audience on X. Now, I mean, I still want to call it Twitter. Let's just call it Twitter. I still hate X. For years before I started creating content on LinkedIn. So I had a lot of proven content that had worked on X. So I started kind of like really committing to building on X in 2020. I didn't really take LinkedIn seriously, I'd say, until like maybe 2020, end of 2023, 2024, maybe, but I had content that had performed well in X. So initially I was just reposting the stuff that worked well in X. So I was taking my threads, turning those into LinkedIn posts. And over time, my interest shifted from X being my playground and LinkedIn being this like side place that I was just republishing to actually preferring to spend time on LinkedIn. I think that LinkedIn's really built a great and vibrant community. X had a really big problem with like porn bots and like just low signal content. It's actually they made some huge improvements in the last 6 months, but for a good tranche of time, it was a kind of wasteland compared to what it had been. Um, and so I had a head start because I had a lot of proven content. run a newsletter about why people buy and the psychology of. I have products on the psychology of copywriting. So like I just really geeked out about understanding why does somebody pay attention? What is persuasive? And by doing all of that research for our newsletter and for the products that we would build, I then can apply all of that to my LinkedIn. So I'd say my shortcut is basically just really geeking out about human behavior. And I've never really chased algorithm. Like I don't spend time commenting. I never like really jumped on like trends. Like I probably published like 5 carousels, but for me, the thing that I did invest in is I was like, I am going to understand what makes a piece of content, not just one that might go viral, because I've had lots of viral content, but one that actually is going to motivate people to take the actions that I want them to take, which in my case was signing up for my newsletter, buying products when we launched them. And so I really focus more on the understanding who I'm serving and what type of writing is gonna attract them, and I kind of ignore a lot of the more trendy stuff to my downfall. I think I probably would have grown a lot faster if I was playing the comment game. Um, I just don't have bandwidth. I don't have mental bandwidth for it. I'm too ADHD. Like I can't go like I can't be like, "Okay, I'm gonna go spend like 20 minutes today like surfing and finding interesting stuff to comment on." I just get distracted and I end up writing like 3 comments and like giving nothing. So, I kinda just scroll my feed, find something I like, comment, and then I'm out.
So what's your process then for writing these posts today? I know you said you repurposed a lot of stuff from X, but you post pretty much daily. How do you come up with these ideas? How long does it take you to write them? Do you have like a giant Google Doc somewhere with all these ideas? What's the process?
My process has changed a lot in the last, 8 months. So, previously, I always wanted to have a strong process, but it essentially looked like I had, like, built out this whole coda system that, like, looked great, but I just didn't use it. Mostly, I would just have an idea, email myself, like, a voice note about the idea, and then go down and sit in the morning and write it. I often knew what was coming up, so I was intentionally priming people for whatever was coming up. So if we were launching a new product, I was creating posts around that topic so that by the time the product launched, people would already be bought into the idea. And like basically I was making my argument, promoting that, and then by the time the product launched, I knew people would buy in. So I'd say I was strategic around launches, but because of the way my business worked previously, when there wasn't a launch, then I was basically just like, what's on top of mind for me today? Um, and many of the people that were joining my newsletter, they're marketers, they're entrepreneurs. So the same things that I'm picking up on that are interesting to me, I knew would be interesting to them too. Doing research, understanding them. So that was my process before. I have a process now that works incredibly well for me. So I spent like probably 100 hours, maybe more, building a content co-writer in Claude. So it's trained on my brand strategy, my voice, my posts that have been successful. And it basically is like a thought partner. So I can go to it either with an idea, I can have it help me come up with ideas, but it writes basically the first draft with me. But before doing that, it's like asking me questions, it's pulling in proof points and stories for my own business that it has a big archive of. So building that system has helped me to go from previously writing a longer form post for LinkedIn. Sometimes it could take me 90 minutes to 3 hours. It could take
Oh,
me
just
like 90 minutes to 3 hours. And now I'm down to probably closer to like 45. And I have, when it comes to the visual side of things, I've got templates and whatnot in Canva, so I can go in and make some like reuse a template and try to use that. But I'm not as good at that. I should get ahead of it. But yeah, my process building the Claude co-writer has really sped things up for me.
that's really smart. I think that AI is something everyone is thinking about, but not everyone is using it in that kind of a way. And especially for people that produce a lot of written content, I think not just written content, video content as well, just for ideation and staying organized and coming up with scripts, post copy, things like that. I think that AI can be very, very useful. I know there's a lot of AI haters out there as well who will be like, "Oh, you shouldn't be using it," but
I was an AI naysayer initially, and what I came to realize, I actually just wrote a post about this, is that the success that you get with now there are all there let's just set aside here and we'll talk about this in a second though, but there are some real, like, societal concerns around AI that are not being well addressed. There are some, environmental concerns. I'm not saying that any of that isn't valid and something that we can address after this, but like I do when it comes just to the question of like, can AI output be good? Most of the stuff that you see in your feed that's garbage is garbage because it's often being created by somebody who doesn't understand the craft, right? So like somebody who doesn't understand how to do great design can push something out with AI and it's going to be okay, but it's not going to be great. And okay is not enough anymore. It used to be enough that you could have okay instead of bad, and that'd be fine. But with AI, everybody can do okay. So it's got to be better. And so I think that the people who get the most leverage from AI are the ones that actually take the time to really codify their thinking and their approach and build tools that are trained on the type of intuition that they would naturally bring to a project. And that's a whole other level of investment of time and energy. And for some folks, it's not worth it. Like if you love to write, like I love writing because it clarifies my thinking. I'm never going to not write. But if you love to write, if you're one of those people who can sit down and, 15 minutes, write your newsletter and send it out, like that's never been me. It would take me like 2 thirds of a day to write our newsletter. And so like if you're somebody who loves to do that, you can do it really efficiently. You probably don't need to spend an enormous amount of time building something to help you. But if you're somebody who's good at a craft, but like still it's very time consuming. There's elements of it that are very time consuming. Why not look for ways to make an investment to build tools to help you? Like it just feels like I think that a lot of people are scared of it, but if you start to just see it as a tool, like there's tools that we use every day in our business that people were scared of. People were scared of computers, people were scared of the internet. Like all of those had huge naysayers. They changed the way that we do work. And I think that AI is at another level than those things, but it's still just a tool. And the people who use it to get to the most effect are the ones who are true craftspeople and that they can train it to work more like them. But it takes a shit ton of effort to do it, right? You do a lot of context setting. You have to learn to like have all these guardrails and like basically the mental things that you run through when you write a post. You have to build that into a system. Like my content co-writer, the instructional doc is 52 pages long. Like it's not some like you see people sharing like here's like my magic prompt and it's like 8 lines and you're like no that's not that's not going to get the output that they're promising it's going to get.
that's really interesting, Caitlin, and I want to dig into that because I've seen some people come up with what they would call maybe a character sheet, and you can use AI for this. Basically ask it, "Hey, like based on our chats or based on XYZ things, write me a document that basically describes if I wanted to feed it to an AI, my tone of voice, the things that I typically say, how I say them, what I believe, what I don't believe, the things that I definitely don't want to say or sound like or come across." And it can be very lengthy, and it sounds like you have a 52-page doc, which is crazy.
Well, the 52-page doc is just doc, but then there's also like 5 other docs, which is I have my authority science framework, which is basically like there's 4 types of content that you can create that build authority, and it's like problem-based content, point of view based content, promise-based content, and proof. And you have to repeat all those. So I've got a framework that's like 32 different frameworks underneath those. I've got a document on how to write hooks based on principles, not based on like templates. So it's different than a lot of the AI writing tools out there that will basically just take a template. Um, and I have a voice profile that I've created by basically training the AI on my content. So like it took a lot of effort to make this thing. I'm not saying it was fast. But yeah, it's in doing that work, which took me a lot of time, I've now created something that really does save me a lot of time and really does generate content that sounds like me. It still takes a lot of editing, like, but the ideas that are going in are mine. I'm not saying like write me a post today about behavior psychology and then like just putting out what it like I'm actually going to like here's my idea for the content, here's my story, like here's my thinking around it. I do that like with a voice note and then it asks me questions about my perspective. It asks me questions about my own experiences that I can interject that are like my personal bits. And so that makes a post quote that feels like something Caitlin would write because Caitlin did write it.
Mm. And so today, say for example, you're drafting a post, you've got all these docs, you're feeding them to Claude, and then are you just coming to it with an idea and being like, hey, I want to write a post today about how agency owners can think about their ownable idea. And then it'll go back and forth with you. Okay, give me a little bit more clarification or XYZ thing.
It helps
Is that how it
generate, like,
works?
3 angle ideas, so, like, all there it can work in 3 ways. I kind of built it because I built it it's a tool that I give to our clients at Unignorable too, but it can do 3 things. You can come to it with an idea, you can, have it generate ideas for you based on its understanding of your strategy and also looking out into the broader landscape and seeing what's topical right now, or, you can actually have it plan out kind of like 2 weeks of content for you. So I generally go to it with an idea because I'm bad at planning in advance. And so like I'll be like, oh shit, I need to post something today. Um, and so I'll generally go to it with an idea. I'll go for like a walk in the morning and I'll like talk my idea into it. And like we'll together come back with like kind of like first version of the draft. And then when I get to my computer, I'll sit down and I'll actually edit it and make some changes and improve it. But you can use it to help you like think through ideas, but I tend to come to it with an idea.
Fascinating. Last question for you, more specific to LinkedIn, is as a user of the platform and as someone who creates a lot of content on LinkedIn and has used many of the features, is there anything that you wish they would change about LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that it's funny because like, the things that people wished for back when before Elon took over X, there were things that people complained about at the platform. One of the big ones, the visibility that was given to threads that used a particular kind of, like, style of hook, like, they were just, I think that what was the joke that people used to call them? They called them, like, Wikipedia bros or something. It was like it was kind of like a dunk on Sahil Blue because he was really good at this style of content and it helped him grow really quickly, and he's a brilliant guy. But I think, like, there was a style of post that was just dominating over there, and it annoyed people because there was just too much of it. And so there was when Elon took over, he ended up making all these changes. He, like, downgraded the amount of visibility that, threads would get, all these big he got rid of like, the 280 character limit, which I still think is a huge mistake. Like, I think that they should have kept that. Like, it created a difference of how people communicated their ideas there versus long form content. I think they could have brought in articles and had it been a separate thing. But anyway, that's my gripe. But I think so. The complaint I have about LinkedIn is the AI content, like the AI comments rather. Like it's just really annoying that people are not genuinely having a conversation anymore. They're just using these tools to comment, and they're not always initially obvious, but it's in the pattern that you spot when they're obvious, right? Like the first one somebody sends, like you see that there's kind of a timing between when you post and when they comment, and I think that they are putting at risk the true value of a social network, which is humans showing up to interact with each other. And as soon as it's just, bots writing comments, bots creating content, and the people just like sign out and they go, okay, it's all going to run on its own, like that's going to kill what social is supposed to be. And so I'd say that they need to deal with that. And at the same time, the reason that that has become this like dominant thing is because of all of the, LinkedIn gurus basically saying if you spend all of your time commenting, you get a lot more visibility and then you're going to grow your audience faster. And there was a period when that was true. And so people are trying to game the system. And by gaming the system, they're actually degrading the platform. So I would say LinkedIn really needs to figure out how to encourage really how to encourage quality content, but also how not to create a huge barrier where people who don't necessarily have a lot of time feel like, "Oh, I need to find a hack." Because if you feel like you need to find a hack because you're busy, which all of us are, and therefore you start using like these AI comment bots, you are likely to degrade your reputation, which I don't think that a lot of people realize, but it's also just gonna degrade the platform long term. And, like, you're already seeing it now. You're seeing people being like, "I'm just tuning out." Like, I scroll through my comments and I can just tell that, like, half of them are unlikely to actually be that person. It's either they're using a comment bot or they've hired a VA to do it for them. And I just think that's going to send the platform and all social platforms in a bad direction. It's a short-term hack that can help people now, but long term, I think it's going to kill social media. And none of us just want to show up on a platform to talk to bots. We don't want to waste our time talking to bots.
It's so funny that you bring that up because recently, I don't know if you saw the VP of the consumer experience at LinkedIn was posted a video talking about what they're doing to deal with these automated comments. And I couldn't help but think about that tension between, yes, protecting the user experience being super important, should be a top
Mhm.
priority for LinkedIn. I'm all for it. But then at the same time, a lot of people that come to LinkedIn and some of the most active users here run businesses. LinkedIn is a big channel for them. And so they're almost incentivized to try to farm as much engagement as possible by any means. And that's why you see so many of these tools that pop up that help you with engagement and comments and posting. And I think that it's never as black and white, of course. Like there's a lot of value that you can get from using some of these tools, but just it also leads to a lot of spammy content and low value comments. And I don't know if there's a good solution to this, but I'm glad that LinkedIn is at least taking some steps to pare back on the automated commenting.
Me too. I think it's a tricky thing, and I think that you'll see that ultimately it'll be the culture that drives what comes next because when there's always a paradigm, right? There's all or a pendulum swing. Like I feel like there was a long time with content where highly polished, beautiful videos and like great design and scripted content was the stuff that people were like, "Oh, that's what good content looks like." And I feel like now we're going to see the pendulum swing the other way where people are going to use they're gonna write with AI, but tell the AI to intentionally put in spelling errors to try to make it look authentic. Like, I think we're gonna see the pendulum swing the other way, where more people are just holding up their cell phone and talking into it and not editing it, because the culture is always we're driven by our desire for novelty, and so there's this pendulum swing that goes each way. And I think that it brings a bigger conversation, which is too big for us to talk about today. But the reality is like, what is real, right? Like all of us that take photos, a lot of us will use a filter on those photos. Are we then creating something that's not real? Like as a woman, if you have eyelash extensions or hair extensions, like are you creating something that's not real? Like, there's this question around with AI comments. Like I feel like we are very quick to be judgmental of things that are outside of our bounds of what real is, but then we'll discount all the things that we might be doing that maybe are not real, right? Like if you have a VA that helps you manage your inbox, does that mean that you're not real? Like, so I think that opens a bigger question around what does it mean to show up as yourself and what is inbounds and what's not. Like, because we're seeing these tools like you can actually train a tool on your voice. And so you can record a whole podcast just from a piece of text that maybe you created from an AI prompt that's like designed to write this way. And so like suddenly you can have whole podcasts coming out that a person never spoke a thing. They never actually like wrote the script and it sounds like it's them. Like, is that real? I think we're gonna see a real pushback of people seeking out things that feel real. And what that means is yet to be seen.
This is incredible. Is there anything you want to share with the audience, Caitlin, before we let you go?
No, I think, keep hanging out on LinkedIn. Like ultimately, I do think that it's a really incredible platform for building your authority, for attracting your ideal customers and clients. And I think it's the best right now for a lot of types of businesses. So spend your time there. Work with smart folks like yourself and make sure you have the foundational stuff right before you kind of outsource your voice. But there's a lot of value to be had and it's a good business channel. So spend your time there.
Amazing. Thanks for coming on.
Daniel here from the editing booth. I wanted to leave you with one key takeaway that I have from this episode, and that's the concept of an ownable idea. And I think we worry too much about repeating ourselves in content, thinking that our audience is just going to get bored of what we're saying, when in reality, it's the opposite. We get better at articulating a message. Gary Vee's been saying the same thing for years, and it still goes viral. The same thing with Katelyn, the same thing with Matt's whiteboard videos, And the same thing with LinkedIn is the next TikTok. You don't get old of it, you just feel like you're part of the mission now. Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support.